Assassin's Creed Odyssey is gorgeous on PC. I mean, just look at this guy's chin. But darn if it isn't heavy. Just watching some of this gameplay from me here shows it. This was my first naive opening of the game, where I put everything up to ultra high preset at 1080p with adaptive anti-aliasing. It's not a locked 60, that's for certain. Those settings really hammer the CPU and GPU on this Ryzen 1700X GTX 1070 PC. But what is that I hear in the distance? On yonder ridge? A savior upon the back of a noble steed? Nah, it's just the settings menu. Yes, an Ubisoft-styled settings menu though. I geeked out the last time I reviewed one with Far Cry 5, and everything I said there holds true. You have awesome control over downsampling, field of view, resolution, and a lot of visual settings. This menu in Assassin's Creed Odyssey, along with the benchmark in the main menu, tell you and show you nearly everything you need to know about the graphics and how each tick upward and downward will affect the game image. The only thing they are really missing are massive warning stickers for performance. Let me get this out of the way real quick. Ultra high in this game means ultra high. This and the very high in this game tend to add decadent amounts of detail into facets of the image and are not geared towards trying to achieve a certain frame rate at a certain resolution. They exist to make the game look pretty and scale well onto either really expensive current hardware or future hardware. And that is the key to getting better frame rates in Assassin's Creed Odyssey. And it's also a great clue into how they get the console versions running at all. So you need to make strategic cuts to fidelity in a number of places to help your GPU and CPU as much as possible. And that all starts with the extremely important volumetric clouds option here. Here on PC, this option generally increases the fluffiness, internal density, lighting update frequency, and believability of clouds. All the way down to low, which strips off the features from medium and above. It has a massive performance implication. Going from ultra high to very high gives you 25% performance gain, with decreasing performance gain thereafter to about 33% more performance on low. Although these clouds generate randomly and move randomly within the game world after it spawns, by spending a lot of time squinting and looking, it looks like the Xbox One X version of the game either utilizes a setting somewhere between high and very high, but they are so similar looking in most cases that it's pretty hard to say here. Given the performance cost and tendency to stick to high that I noticed for Xbox settings, I would not be surprised if that were indeed the case. One of your next greatest saves for performance is the anti-aliasing setting, which is a bit deceptive as to how it actually functions. It would appear all the low to high settings here use a form of accumulation temporal supersampling, but medium and low actually reconstruct that image up to your native chosen image resolution. We do not have direct confirmation from Ubisoft yet as to the nature of this functioning, but it should be noted that having MFAA on in the NVIDIA control panel messes up the game's rendering, hinting at a multi-sample anti-aliasing or MSAA usage somehow in the game. Either way, medium looks to be around 90% of your resolution on each axis, and low around 80% of each axis. Setting it to adaptive with various frame rate targets will then adjust the resolution dynamically till it hits that low setting to maintain the frame rate. Moving this setting to medium saw around an 8% performance increase on average, and around a 20% performance increase on average when set to low. Counterintuitively, the off setting renders the image at a native chosen resolution just without TAA, so it's jaggy as heck and only runs around 3% better than the high setting. Xbox One X here uses the 30 FPS adaptive version from what we can see, but will scale more extremely than the adaptive resolution found on PC, going below the 80% cap that we see on PC. As per Tom's reporting on the Xbox One X version, it can scale down to 60% of a 4K resolution. I recommend setting this to adaptive with your chosen resolution, as in the moment when it does actually change, it's pretty well hidden by the reconstruction, and especially at high resolutions. After anti-aliasing, another great performance saver here on PC is found in the environmental detail setting. This changes the call-in range and level of detail distance for many of the world's objects. Going from ultra high to high sees a 12% performance increase, and all the way down to 21% performance increase on low. Here I was able to determine that the Xbox One X version uses the high setting. Notice how the PC Ultra on high here has much richer foliage in the distance, or how much more detailed these far off buildings are. It definitely increases how often the world pops in around you, but high is definitely the sweet point for performance and looks that I would recommend. Crucially, this option does not control the permanent density of world grass patches or bushes, which is controlled by the Clutter option here. Here we can say Xbox One X is using the most closest to very high setting, with no visible cutbacks to these type of objects. On PC you get around a 6% performance increase when going to high from very high, and diminishing single percentage returns thereafter. Given how the setting is so cheap and crucial to the world looking as dense as it does, I recommend very high here for most. The last great win in terms of performance here on PC is found in the shadow settings. This setting changes the resolutions of the closest cascades and pushes out the distance where the shadow map switches to a lower resolution. When going from ultra high to high, there's a 5% return, and increases to 10% better performance on high and around 16% better performance on low. It can be said that the Xbox One X version here runs at the high setting, which can easily be seen on the resolution of cascades in the distance, as well as those cascades up close to the character models, where ultra high makes bits of letter and tiny details sit much more realistically on Alexios here. Should push come to shove, I definitely think the Xbox One X's choice here for high shadows is the recommended for those who are looking to save on performance without destroying shadow quality. Scrolling a bit forward into this cutscene even, we can see how the Xbox One X here uses actually the medium quality for environmental textures as found on PC. Curiously though, the PC version also has increased ground displacement in the scene, and on most of the game world actually, which cannot be lowered to match the Xbox One X's settings. Even when adjusting the terrain setting with its invisible performance footprint, you can see how it only affects the displacement of very distant terrain, like mountains. Either way, the texture setting on PC does not have a notable performance concern and is best kept to high at most times unless you are targeting 4K with a card that has less than 8GB of VRAM. At high and at 4K, I saw it reaching nearly 7GB of VRAM utilization. At 1080p though, the differences were minor, with high utilizing around 5GB of VRAM, medium around 4.5 gigs or so, and low around 3.8. After this, we have three options with mystery settings on Xbox One X. The first of which being fog, which on PC looks nearly identical in practice between high, medium, and low. Performance-wise, you see healthy gains of around 8% when going to medium, and 11% when going to low. Although in theory we know that the resolution of the voxels comprising it are lower as the settings go lower, the general haziness of it makes it hard to spot any difference. Unlike other games, this does not seem to cause a snapping or popping due to the lower resolution. Given this, I recommend the low volumetric fog quality for those who are looking to save on performance. Another mystery setting is ambient occlusion. When flipping between these settings on PC, it's pretty hard to see any difference at all. They all look rather the same, with perhaps slightly different levels of darkening, which is mainly an aesthetic thing. When looking at performance though, you can see a 4% increase going to high from very high, with medium having performance increases within the margin of error at 5%. Turning it off gives you around 7% more performance. Given these circumstances, I recommend high here. The last mystery setting on Xbox One X is also a mystery on PC. No matter how hard I tried to find the differences in scenes, or even by utilizing the benchmark, I could not determine the performance considerations of the character detail setting. The performance difference that it may have may be lost in the noise of the open world here. Likewise, the world is so darn dynamic that reloading it after settings changes the NPC positions and their appearance even. Given that, I would recommend leaving this setting to ultra high until a more reproducible way of seeing its effects on performance can be determined. Considering how even the benchmark shows no difference though, it cannot be too important. The last group of settings available on PC are universally running on high on Xbox One X. SSR controls the quality of screen space reflections on water, with them taking a rather different look on medium, and making the water decidedly strange looking when set to off. Going to medium here increases performance by 11%, and off by around 14%. Nonetheless, given the aesthetic effect that it has, I think high is recommended here for most, given the wealth of water surfaces in this game and making them actually look like they should. The water quality setting is likewise one where anything other than high or very high too drastically affects the quality of water to make them recommendable changes. Here, going to lower settings takes away the refraction or the cool interactive particle foam on the wave crest. Going from very high to high saw near imperceptible performance differences alongside near imperceptible visual ones. Going down to medium though saw a near 8% performance increase, and low seeing no measurable performance difference beyond that. Then we have two settings that are welcome but have questionable utility. The character texture quality setting does exactly as it says, but it has no performance impact and very little impact on utilized VRAM amounts. It has around 50 megabyte difference between high and low on 1080p on average. Given that, keep this to high. Then you have the depth of field setting, which allows you to turn it off for those who don't care for its aesthetic and cutscenes, and for you to change its internal quality should you be bandwidth bound for some reason. In practice though, the difference is actually not that large. At 1080p there was no measurable performance difference between high and low, and only a 3% performance increase when turning it to off. At 4K, we were finally able to see a difference between the quality settings, where low increased performance at best by 6%. But that was already in a scene where it was running in sub 20 FPS territory. So as I said, the option is limited in utility. In the end, my recommended settings for this game in terms of visual quality and performance are extremely similar to those used on Xbox One X. Although with texture quality being set higher should you have that 8GB of VRAM when targeting 4K. In which case, if you don't, just merely use medium. With the recommended settings, I was able to play at 1080p at 60 FPS target with much GPU headroom to spare on a GTX 1070 and Ryzen 1700X, where on Ultra, I was seeing frame dips from 60 FPS all over the place. At the same time though, the Ryzen 1700X is the main limiting factor here in hitting a nice smooth 60 FPS. When entering towns or just traversing about, you can see a small hitch here or there, or even extended drops below 60 FPS, although GPU utilization is low. This game just requires tons of CPU power in terms of threads, as well as single-threaded performance to hit 60 FPS. Locking the game to 30 here and cranking the game up to 4K saw a flat, even line of performance with the GTX 1070 here at these settings. Moving over to the more mid-range setup, with a Core i5-8400 with 16GB of RAM at 2667 MHz and either a GeForce GTX 1060 or an AMD Radeon RX 580, the performance outlook was a bit more mixed. The GTX 1060 managed a great 1080p 60 with these settings even when turning off adaptive resolution reconstruction in normal gameplay. The RX 580 on the other hand saw generally lower frame rates at the same settings, but did better with adaptive set on. Both GPUs though are prevented from a consistent flatline FPS experience due to CPU limitations. Each core here sees a near 100% hammering when targeting 60 FPS and uncapped here, with frame drops below that even with adaptive resolution being set to on. When upping the resolution with the intent to utilize a 30 FPS frame cap, the RX 580 in general does slightly better at higher resolutions. Given the more conservative nature of dynamic resolution here on PC in comparison to Xbox One X, you'll have to be careful with your upper bound resolution set. While normal gameplay moments of serenity may even allow for a 4K target, and you to hit that rather well, as you can see on the RX 580 here, any huge battle moment or an area with lots of transparency and effects work will see your frame rate tank to where you'll have to go into the menu and change the resolution downward again. Here I found that the sweet spot for the GTX 1060 and RX 580 to be around 160% resolution scaling from 1080p. For those of you with 4K monitors or televisions, the same could be done with the 80% resolution scale. Going head to head with these settings, we can see how similar the performance is between these two cards, with different scenes having different winners. Looking at that performance in general though, I see a couple of sticking points. One, this game on Ultra is ultra heavy, but the game offers great scaling where you can get similar graphical fidelity with much more performance just by lowering a few key settings. After that, the game's CPU performance heavily gets in the way of most players on PC targeting a consistent 60 FPS. Thus, 30 FPS targets are probably going to be more realistic for many more users. It's not as if the Ryzen and Core i5 here are bad CPUs. They're both leagues ahead of the Jaguar found in the Xbox One X, which does throw up some questions as to what's happening here. I think it's twofold. On Xbox One X, there are many more hidden cutbacks and optimizations that we cannot visibly see in the game, making it run at all at 30 FPS there. The Xbox One X version is also presumably using a low-level API, with DX12 on Xbox One X being the candidate. Given how darn heavy this game is on PC, I think it is high time that the Anvil Next engine makes the transition to a low-level API to help alleviate some of these CPU issues I'm seeing here. I find it slightly unacceptable that a Ryzen 1700X is having issues when using ballparked console settings. That brings me to my last nagging issues I've had with the game. Given how many people realistically will be forced to target 30 FPS locks in this game, it would be nice if the in-game frame rate limiter found in the menu did not induce frame pacing problems. It currently locks the game to a real 31 FPS with a periodic 16.6 millisecond uptick. If you want a real 30 FPS lock, you have to use the half refresh rate VSync in the NVIDIA control panel or RTSS. Lastly, it would be nice if more settings did not require game restarts. It would make my life easier for one, and the life of the end user that much better. Being able to instantly see the performance and visual games in-game makes the experience of playing a game on PC that much better. Beyond those two issues and the CPU limited nature here, this is a spectacular looking game, and I was pretty thrilled to play the parts that I have. Perhaps not as thrilling though as watching this video. If you did find this content thrilling, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. If you are already a subscriber, please consider hitting that little bell in the corner to be informed as soon as Digital Foundry posts a video. If you want to talk to me about Assassin's Creed Odyssey and the virtuous good of turning down settings from Ultra, write a comment below or follow me and Digital Foundry on Twitter. As always, this is Alex, bidding you farewell und auf Wiedersehen.
Fun's over.